For an in-depth look at the drug industry, I spoke to Robert Kemp, economist and professor at the University of Louisiana. He explained how companies are able to charge high prices for their products.
Well, I think it depends upon which country we're speaking of. The U.S. has the most expensive prices, being somewhat around 40% higher than the other developed countries, and the lesser developed countries will have prices even much lower than the European or the Eastern European countries.
The cost of drugs, you mentioned that it costs 40% more in the United States than it does in other developing parts of the world. And I think it's very hard for consumers to accept that. I mean, what is the best explanation of why it has to cost more in certain countries than another?
Well, the prices of drugs in, say, the U.S., for instance, are due basically to the success in the companies in marketing those drugs. And the prices are high because the companies are able to negotiate high prices. The prices are high because they can be so. I mean, because they can get those prices.
I mean, this is a classic argument, and we saw this a lot over the past couple of years. A lot of people have pointed out Canada as an example. A lot of people go across the border to Canada to get drugs because they could cost up to 50% less than what they're paying for in the United States. And it's just so hard to explain to somebody who needs this health care to say that more marketing might be spent in the U.S. or they maybe have to have a higher profit margin. It's hard to block out the profit part of the drug, isn't it?
It very much is. I mean, if you look at the average cost of production for the major drug companies, when I say production, how much it costs to bring the drug to market, marketing is much higher than research and development, and marketing is the major expenditure in the U.S. for drugs.
I mean, this has been a classic argument, right? A drug company says, I want to spend X amount of dollars to do research and development to find a cure to a specific disease or medical problem. They create it, they spend the money, and then after a number of years, after the drug has gotten FDA approval, they lose that patent. Essentially, it can become a generic drug at that point. Let me start with this question. How much as a percentage of total cost do drug companies spend on R&D?
It's in the range of 11 to 16%. Marketing is, according to what the Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association has told us, runs as high as 35%.
The patents they have essentially expire, and generic drug companies can then make the exact same drug with the exact same chemicals. I mean, are they exactly the same, and do you think that this should be allowed?
They are exactly the same, but you have to realize that in some countries, the generic markets are not very large. There's not a lot of generics, and that is because there has to be a spread between the single source patented product and the price of the generic in order to engender generic competition.
A lot of countries say, why can't they have drugs that their people can afford? And I'm talking about basically lowering the cost of prescription drugs for those who medically need it. And what is your solution to that?
Lower the prices to the drugs, yes. I think the governments, if they use their monopoly power on the buying side, we call that monopsony power, if they do, they will actually increase the amount of drugs sold in the country by the drug companies. In other words, they can improve the volume by improving the access to their drugs, and drug companies are more than willing to make volume agreements with countries. They've done so in Australia, where prices are quite reasonable, in many other countries. So they trade off the higher premium prices for the increase in volume.